afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. When it comes to producing maple, Vermont is the nation's leader. But the worldwide leader in maple production is the province of Quebec. Vermont and Quebec are the two heavy hitters at the recent conference in Burlington that brought together maple makers from all around the world. The conference and trade show touched on everything from equipment and technology to climate and pests. One of the conference organizers was Vermont's own maple expert, Mark Isselhart.
This is the joint meeting, the annual meeting of the North American Maple Syrup Council and the International Maple Syrup Institute. The tradition is to have the conference, which is held annually, rotate between all the states and provinces that produce syrup so that everyone gets exposure to the latest information, technology, education and research about what's happening in the industry. And by holding it in different states and provinces, you get to see how syrup is done in different areas. Ultimately, we're making the same great product, but there are different ways of marketing, different ways of producing regionally, and this is a way so that we're not totally focused in one area. During the sugaring season, it's really hard to get out of the sugar house. You know, you're so focused on all the work of producing syrup, it can be difficult to hear and communicate with, areas that are further afield. So this is a chance when it's busy, but it's not nearly as busy as the producing season, to make connections to other operations, learn the latest technology and research. So it allows for nice discussions between producers and equipment manufacturers. Now, with the grading system that has been adopted, essentially industry-wide, to have a uniform set of names for the grades and standards, that there is this consistent message of what the product is, and that really is targeted to consumers, people who have no real intimate knowledge of how maple is produced. And that came about because of this cooperation between the various states and provinces, and these organizations were the ones who spearheaded the idea of coming up with a more harmonizing the grades, you might say. And that wouldn't have happened if it had been in a more individual state-by-state process.
Mark, what does it mean for you personally to meet with your colleagues both in this country and in Canada?
In research, a lot of times you're focused in your one little area, and then you hear, well, so-and-so is working on a very similar project, but just slightly different, and then you can instantly start up a conversation about that and see how you can make both your work better. So we were able to talk about the off-flavor grading kit, we were able to talk about the production videos and let people know, and then get that information out. We heard from New York that there's a curriculum, a K-12 curriculum of getting maple in the classroom, and I wouldn't necessarily have known how far along that project was without having this meeting.
Tim, how are sugar makers dealing with changing climates?
Climate is certainly changing, and we've seen the effects of climate change on the maple industry over the last 50 years or so, primarily in the timing of the season and the duration. The season is now starting about a week earlier than it used to and ending correspondingly earlier, with a little bit of a change in the duration of the season where it's shortening. There's been some recent changes, technological changes, which have lengthened the season a little bit, so we've offset that, and it's also been offset by the tremendous growth in the maple industry over the last 10 years. The short-term type of adaptations we can do is to use extremely good tap hole sanitation, make sure everything is very, very clean. By doing that, it prevents microorganisms from getting in the tap hole and resulting in what we call tap hole drying. So that will help lengthen the season to offset the reduction in duration due to the climate change. The long-term types of things are a little bit more problematic. So tapping on north sides of trees, tapping in sugar bushes that are traditionally colder sugar bushes could be useful. Tapping earlier than you're used to ever before to be able to catch those early runs is probably one of the simplest to do now.
What's the future hold for sugaring?
It's very hard to envision, but there are some things that we can look at and say these are directions that we think the industry is going in. So things like using network sensors for monitoring vacuum and flow out in the woods to be able to rapidly correct leaks in the tubing system to address problems of the vacuum that may happen if you're not right there at the time. You can be notified by these sensors calling your cell phone and telling you that you have a problem and get out there and fix it. The season is so short that if you don't correct those problems immediately, you could have a negative impact on your production. So that type of technology is going to become much more prevalent than it is now.
Our producers in Ontario are interested in is just the production overall of all the provinces and states. There is growth and expansion happening right now, and they want to be part of it, and they are trying to be part of that growth and expansion as export and domestic markets increase. Making money drives it like any farm industry. If there's an opportunity to increase, if they have the resources and more sugar bush they can tap into, then they're looking at expansion too, slowly and carefully. Everyone is also wary of overproduction, having markets become saturated, and making sure prices don't come down below the cost of production, and making a bit of profit too. That's the name of the game. So yeah. In Ontario, we don't have a maple syrup research facility dedicated to maple syrup production. It's important to us to have facilities we can depend on. The University of Vermont has been a key player for Ontario producers. It's a key source of research and new knowledge, and I'm always trying to encourage more of the Ontario producers to come to these meetings, to talk to the researchers and other extension people directly, because I'm just one voice, and if they talk to a number of people, they can hear the kind of the scoop, and then they can make up their own decisions. Each producer can think for themselves and have a better idea of directions they should go. Vermont is known as the maple place, and we also know that the equipment manufacturers are here. The Vermont Maple Research Center is here with Proctor, so it's a kind of a hub of maple interest. And it's also a beautiful state too, with the mountains and trees. And yeah, it's a good spot to have a maple meeting. It's good to have it move around every year, but when it hits like a key place, it's kind of nice to come out.
And joining me now is Mark Isselhart. Mark is the UVM Extension Maple Education Specialist and one of the many Vermonters who helped organize the international conference. Thanks so much for being here.
Sure.
Why is it important for the industry to come together every year?
Well, I think Todd pointed to it right there, where this is an industry where we're very focused on our own operations, and that's true in production as well as research. And to have an annual event that you see what other people are working on and how it's relevant to the industry as a whole and how you might be able to collaborate, it's great to have that annual tradition of coming together.
So what were your responsibilities for the conference?
So I helped organize, along with actually my predecessor, Tim Wilmot, and George Cook, also from UVM Extension. We developed the technical sessions, so we had 18 different classes spanning from nuts and bolts of producing syrup to value-added products to some more higher level sort of climate change issues. We put on a nice suite of talks for producers.
So who attended the conference?
So we had a big attendance. We had 400 people at least in attendance, and these were from 20 different states that produce maple syrup, including there was one producer from Missouri, which was it was fun to meet him, and then 5 different provinces as well. And so it was a really broad geographic area, covers all the commercial areas of maple syrup production.
So in the video we saw the pests may affect maple trees in production. That was one issue that was raised. Are pests a big deal for maple?
Yeah, certainly. And we spoke earlier this year about forest tent caterpillar and that outbreak that's still sort of ongoing in Vermont. And we did speak with other areas that have had similar amounts of defoliation for forest tent. But without getting together and talking about what's happening locally, you can't really rely necessarily on mass media to point out these small things. So it's a great opportunity to come together. So those are some of the big issues we talk about.
Well, as the UVM Extension's Maple Specialist, one of your key jobs, of course, is education. And you're creating a series of videos for maple producers. Let's take a look at one of those.
Sure. Making quality pure maple syrup requires a lot of hard work and careful attention to detail. From the tree to the bottle, many steps are required to produce the high-quality product sugar makers are known for and customers expect. Hello, this is Mark Isselhart from the University of Vermont Extension Maple Program. There are 4 grades of pure maple syrup that can be sold in a retail container. They are golden color, delicate taste, amber color, rich taste, dark color, robust taste, and very dark color, strong taste. It is up to the producer, or whomever's name appears on the retail container, to correctly identify into which grade their syrup falls. Whatever the grade of syrup, it must meet the legal standard in 4 categories: color, clarity, flavor, and density. This video will cover the basics of flavor grading maple syrup.
All right, well, that was somewhat a controversial change in naming of maple, the different grades of maple. Has it been successful?
I think it has. You know, it's still being adopted, but the whole point of the harmonizing the grades across all the states and provinces was to really inform consumers who don't really have much of a connection to the production of maple syrup, so they understand what we're talking about as far as the different grades and the flavor to expect. And these videos are really designed to help producers make sure that they make the highest quality product possible.
And so how can people see these videos? Because I guess there are a bunch of them.
Sure. So we started out with just 4, and like I said in that little clip, color, clarity, density, and flavor are the 4 standards by which maple syrup is graded. The first 2, flavor and density, can be found on our website, the UVM Maple Extension website. People are free to check them out, look at them over and over again, and incorporate them into their operations.
So the maple industry, it seems like it's just constantly changing. People either getting bigger, yet we still have some producers that use buckets and horses.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about why it's important for people to stay in touch with some of the changes that are happening.
So no matter the scale of your operation, if you have 1 bucket or if you have 100,000 taps on a tubing system, at the end of the day, everyone produces the same high quality product. And so they all have to meet those same minimum standards. And it's important. I mean, the really big operations produce a huge amount of syrup and get to a lot of consumers, but the imagery of maple a lot of times relies on that sort of traditional view. And likewise, the really small operations, they need to meet the highest quality standards that a really big operation would as well.
And being bigger and having a lot of machinery doesn't necessarily mean it's any less labor intensive.
No. In fact, anyone who's ever tried to boil sap from their backyard knows it's could be very long nights. And so one of the things at the conference was a maple contest. So we had 175 entries of maple syrup, and I was one of the judges for that. And it does sound like a fun activity until you end up tasting a lot.
After like the 30th taste, I might be done.
You have a bit of a bellyache afterwards, but it never fails that entries are the highest and the best quality from a range of operations. The real small operations and the really big ones. So it all comes down to that great quality and really exceptional flavor.
Are there any stresses on the industry?
Well, there is obviously trying to grow the demand, grow the market. Right now, maple is about 1% of the global pourable sweetener market, and collectively the industry is trying to grow that to 2%, which seems like a small amount, except when you talk about doubling the market, that's
right.
no matter what, that's a big jump. I think there are a lot of people in the world. I think maple's a great product, and I think the potential is there. You just have to get the word out. And
well, I think I've seen more information too about the health benefits of maple.
Yeah. There's been some research coming out of Quebec looking at the ingredients in maple. Personally, I think it's just a great product, and I think as long as we rely on that story of it's a wild crop, nothing is added to it, it's made by individual producers, it's not a corporate crop, and it tastes great. I think that's probably has the best longevity out there.
Any forecast for the 2017 sugaring season?
I think you might be the first actually to ask that, but we'll start getting those questions coming very quickly here. There's so many different climate variables and issues as far as tree health that can contribute to the season. By and large, the biggest driver is the weather during that season. But I will say that the rain we're getting right now, being early November, that can really help recharge the ground moisture, which we're kind of in a deficit. So that's really important. And again, talk to me in May, I suppose.
It's all up to Mother Nature.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't really predict it too much.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure.
That's our program. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.